Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing today? Haley, is it true that today is National Pumpkin Day? I absolutely did not know that, but now I'm going to pretend I knew, and that's why I set this up on this particular day. Welcome, everyone, to Effect House Live. I'm so glad to have you. There's already people in the chat, and it's buzzing, and I'm super excited to see you guys. Today, I am joined by Dominic. I think Dominic is a new face in our live. We haven't seen him before. So before we get started on how to create a amazing 3D pumpkin asset for Halloween, I want to give a little intro, introduce you guys. Dom is so cool and he is an amazing breakdancer. If we get to a certain number of viewers, I might release the video so you guys can check out his awesome dance moves. So keep the comments coming, press on those lives. But here's Dominic. Hi, Dominic.
Hello. How's it going?
I love how I'm like, yay, everyone. And Dom's like, hello. In person
Yeah,
too, though, like I feel like he has a very calm vibe. He's very chill and an excellent designer. So I am super glad that he's finally on the live because he's created like awesome assets for our templates. So if you guys are using templates or using asset library, you might have seen some things that his team has created.
yeah. Some really fun ideas, some really fun effects.
Yeah, so Dom wants to keep a little mystique, which is why he will be appearing as a pumpkin today. But
I'm a little
we
shy. I'm a little
Yes, he is
shy.
shy, but he's going to share with us all the amazing tips on how you can improve your 3D sculpting game. Personally, I'm not a big like asset creator myself, but I've been wanting to learn more. So I'm going to learn so much from him today. But Dominic, can you give yourself a little intro?
Yeah. So I've been doing 3D art for maybe 12 years now, a little while. Yeah, I started in high school actually. I always was, I would always draw. High school, there was a 3D animation class. So I was very
Oh,
lucky for that, which kind of opened up the doors to 3D for me. And then went to school at the School of Visual Arts in New York for 3D animation and VFX. And yeah, ever since, just been doing 3D. Yeah.
that's so awesome. So, how did that like class really inspire you to like find out like, oh, it seems like I really love 3D, or was it like something you saw? How did you get started?
Yeah. I think the class was pretty important. I will say, I think I was at the point, I was a senior in high school and I was thinking, what am I going to go to college to do?
As
And
all seniors, I remember when I was a senior, I had like absolutely no clue on what I wanted to do. So,
yeah, and so that was something I knew I was interested in, and having the class kind of helped me focus and be like, oh, this is what this is called. This is what I'm looking for. It kind of helped steer me in the right direction for sure.
that's perfect. Okay, so how long have you been working in TikTok?
It will be almost 2 years. 2 years in,
Yay!
yeah, a year and almost two.
Wow, that's congratulations. What do you currently do at TikTok?
Yeah, I work on a lot of effects. Some of the template stuff I have helped with. Um, Yeah, currently some that'll probably come out pretty soon, and you will see some longer term stuff. But yeah, a lot of effects.
Paula saying hello. Hi, Paula. Haley Catpaws says she didn't know that today was National Pumpkin Day either. Just found out when I went to search. So thank you for letting all of us know. I think it's magical that we happen to set this tutorial on this exact date. Damon is saying hello, love the hair slaying. Thank you so much. I was dressing up for the live today and I was going for like a really buzzed, Frankenstein bride kind of vibe. But then I put on the orange eyeshadow for the pumpkin day, pumpkin tutorial. But it seems like I'm the evil stepmother from Rapunzel. Do you guys know what I mean? Dominic, what do you think? What do you think?
No, I see the look, but I don't think so. I wouldn't have thought that. I wouldn't have thought that.
I think it's honestly funny. After this, I might go to our Discord channel, Effect House Memes, and put a photo of myself next to Rapunzel mom. But thank you, Damon. I'm glad you think the hair is cool. Dongo also says hello. It's so nice to see you guys. Okay. Uh, can you tell us? There's a lot of people in the chat who are beginner sculptors. They are excellent effect creators, but they have never created their own 3D assets. They mostly use assets from other programs like Sketchfab or CG Trader, and they want to get into the sculpting game. Do you have any advice for these people?
Yeah, I think with it comes to doing static models, you have a lot more freedom and it's a lot more simple. So when you get into doing like things that are like character animations, things that are animated, or things that are like skinned, if you have like joints and things like that, that's where things start to get pretty complicated. So I would recommend starting simple if you haven't done much of that at all. And I think this will be a great showing of that, where it's just the pumpkin, but it's a nice pumpkin. It's a good pumpkin. And
Really awesome pumpkin.
yeah, it's a really great pumpkin. I didn't make this pumpkin, but I'll show how you can make your own. And I think it's a good example of like it's a nice stepping stone for sure. It'll help start you off because at the end of the day, you want it to look good. And
Mm,
there's a lot of technical things you need to be aware of along the way. And taking when you're isolating these issues and you're learning and getting more familiar with them one by one, you kind of will not be as overwhelmed, I'm sure, and it'll make things a lot easier.
I think another question, a lot of questions that people might have is what kind of programs do you use?
Yeah. I use a few. It kind of depends on what the task is. But the main modeling package I use is Autodesk Maya. You can use whatever. There's a lot out there. I think at the end of the day, you're gonna be importing it into like Effect House anyway. So how you get there, it doesn't matter as much. But for me, I use Maya. I use Substance Painter. I use ZBrush. Um, I mean, if I really want to, sometimes I'll get crazy with like some marvelous designer. Um, but that's not as common. I think that's nice. That's a nice tool, but there's definitely like things like those that maybe if it calls for it, I'll use it more. But sometimes I just sculpt it. Um, yeah.
How did you learn to do 3D? Is it because you took like a class as a senior, or did you like teach yourself a lot of the skills by watching YouTube? How did you learn?
Yeah. Well, so I think taking a class is always, you know, the most straightforward way of learning. If, you're able to ask questions, but you also have to know how to take the most out of that.
Mm.
So I think it's up to you to ask the questions. It's up to you to, but I always recommend that if you can find a class, that's great. But there's also a lot of resources. Even after I graduated college, I never stopped learning. I think there's a lot of things online that you could look at. There's a lot of different ways of doing things. So just exploring how people are working with certain ways. So that's where I do like the videos online too, because it helps me see like, oh, I didn't even know there was this edit edge flow command that helps a lot that I use all the time that I didn't know
Mm.
about originally.
Okay,
Um,
that's a really good tip. Sane Circle from the TikTok Live is asking, do you have any recommendations for the best app on iPad? Personally, I when I was starting to learn how to sculpt, it was really intimidating. So I went to iPad because that's where I create all of my 2D assets, like drawing on Procreate and stuff. So I started using Nomad Sculpt, and to me, it felt very intuitive, but I wonder if Dom ever creates an iPad.
No, I've been wanting to for a while, but I think that the things that you just mentioned are probably the best at the moment from what I've seen. It does seem like there's definitely hurdles with sculpting on iPad for sure at the moment. And so I've been really interested in doing it, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet because of all that. I think I saw something about ZBrush doing something, or they announced something. So
Yeah,
like,
ZBrush is, I heard, also popular. And just letting you guys know, we're just explaining how we create, but this is definitely not a product endorsement. I wish Adobe sponsored this video, but this is just what we're using. And not, we're not saying like this is objectively the best thing. So just take it with a grain of salt.
yeah, there's a lot of 3D programs out there. There's a couple to choose from. So it's
Okay.
whatever you I feel like sometimes it's whatever you learned at the time that you started learning sometimes is
Mhm.
like what the popular tool is of that time.
So Dominic, what program are you gonna be using today, and what would generally be the rest of the session look like?
Yeah. So I'm gonna start with Maya. I'll explain some technical stuff simply as much as possible, but I'll try to just show real quick a quick demonstration of how to do a model, but I'll use the one from the template to work from. And then I will take that into Substance Painter. I'll explain Substance Painter a little bit. The texturing honestly can be done in a few minutes with how we did it with the pumpkin, because it really is just knowing what you want and how to like achieve the look sometimes. So once you experiment and know what once you've done the work, recreating it isn't super, it's not always that much effort. Um, it still takes time, and then after that, we will take it into Effect House, where I will explain how to put it all together and
Mm.
the technicalities of some of that stuff as well. And
Joshua 19. Oh, did I cut
oh,
you off?
go
Continue.
ahead. Yeah.
Joshua 19 is asking, what is the cat doing? Guys, can you guys hear my cat? They are being extra energetic today. You just saw one walk across the screen, but me and Dom are both cat fans and cat lovers. So I know we have a lot of fellow cat lovers in the chat. So leave a cat emoji, guys. And Saint Circle asked, had a great recommendation. They said, I need Effect House to create ebooks or paperbacks for all of us creators and new creators. Ooh, this is such a fun idea. Thank you for the recommendation. Saint Circle saying, your cats are celebrating the day. Yes, I might have carved a pumpkin today and let them have a nibble. Maybe it's the pumpkin energy on the pumpkin day. Okay. Dom, are we ready to start? Any final words before starting the tutorials?
No, not at all. I think if anything, I would appreciate if people ask questions along the way. I'll try to answer them as
Okay.
best as I can.
Okay.
If you have questions about what I'm doing or something, please let me know.
Perfect.
Um, I mean, we'll definitely answer questions after, I think, as well, right? But but if you have anything during, I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Um, yeah,
Okay, let's get started.
cool. Alrighty. So I'm working on a Mac today. Doesn't matter. um, but that's what if you. I'm usually working on a PC, so if you see me fumbling with shortcuts, that's why. Um, but yeah, so this is the pumpkin model. This is it. This is the one from the template. This is just the model, so there's no textures to it yet. I think it's a good exercise to just look at the models sometimes, the ones, especially if you didn't make them, just to see like how to achieve the effect that you want, right? Because I think a lot of the times we model and you want to gather your references, right? So references are very important, so you know how to do it. But then you don't necessarily know how to achieve that look, and so sometimes even looking like I recommend this. Basically, what I'm getting at is try to build up a vocabulary of models in your of like how they look like without textures. I think that's important because the textures hide a lot of the details of the model sometimes, but those are still important in like how they catch the light and things like this. A lot of the, especially when it comes to characters and faces, the way the depth of the eye, the corners, and there's a lot of details in the model that are lost when you start doing texturing and material stuff that isn't super obvious. So looking at a model is like very naked. It's like, okay, it's very obvious, but you don't necessarily know that by looking at a picture of a pumpkin. Um, and so obviously this comes with time and experience. You will see more models as you make more, as you research more. There's always 3D scan data online. There's things that there are resources available for this stuff. If you go on Sketchfab, you can download a model and look at it. So just yeah, I think this is always helpful. But I will start with this. Um, yeah, and the method of modeling today, there's sculpting, right, which many people know. I'm going to do a more traditional box model approach today. I think it's still a very powerful way of doing things, um, that can do a lot if you are familiar. So we'll start with this. I'll do like, let me see. I'm going to count, right? So I'm using this as my reference. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So around 12, maybe 13. So let's do 14. Um, cool. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. I'm noticing the shape of the pumpkin. It's round, but it's still very squished. If I look at like the front view, it's very like, what's the word? I don't know. It's squished. So I will do that by taking these two and just doing something like this. Oop. And then doing like that, and then I can do this, try to pull it back up. And so like things like this, I think are very, very valuable ways. This is like sculpting is like much more new. It's not that new, but it's a newer way of doing things. But yeah, I think knowing good box modeling is important because you're going to need, for real time especially, you're going to need to do a version of a model. This is pretty like high poly still, but it's not really that high poly. But it's, there we used to do much lower poly things. Um, used to be more, have like a model that's very low poly.
Dom, this might be a basic question, but what's the difference between high poly and low poly? What does it mean for beginner
Uh,
users?
oh no, nothing is too basic. Thank you. Actually, I should explain. Yeah, so low poly and high poly. So a model is broken up into polygons. Um, Here, I'll do this extrusion and then I can demonstrate it. But so a model is broken up into polygons. A polygon is made up of vertices, right? That's what we're seeing, in this example here. It's much more obvious. Um, right? So this is a polygon. This is a vertice. A high poly model is more. If you turn on the HUD, um, well, I forget where the menu is, but so basically, this model is made up of much more polygons. You can pull up the window. I forgot where it is. Heads up display. There it is. So this model is 8,792 faces. This model is 322 faces, right? Much lower polygon count. Um, all models are a certain amount. When you do real time rendering, real time engines need to render these per frame. And so this stuff, something you should be aware of when you're creating effects, especially for lower end devices. High end devices nowadays are better. They're not you know, such a thing. But I mean, it's still something you should consider. You should be aware because it's how the engine will operate, right? Um, yeah. So thank you for asking. Um,
Personally, I think it's really amazing that Effect House, which is a phone, allows you to work with like such complicated like 3D models and have it be viewable and interactable in our phones. Because before, I remember having to put on like really bulky headsets or like have equipment that cost like hundreds of dollars, and that was like a lot of pressure. I feel like I was interested in AR before, but I didn't get into it until like things like Effect House and TikTok came out, because I was so worried about like having to buy like a headset. So I think it's so cool that we can make a 3D model in your computer, put it on Effect House, and then everybody can try out in their phones. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think real time has come very far. It used to be so much more limited in what you could do, and I'm even always surprised daily by the capabilities. um, so it's improving always at a very fast pace, as I'm sure creators are aware of. Um, yeah, so here I'm like doing a lot of these operations. Basically, I'm just like grabbing the general shape of things. I don't know why it's getting blurry like that, but I'm grabbing the general shape of my models and pulling them around. I'm just thinking about like, yeah, the general shape of it all. Because then once you have something you're pretty happy with, it's kind of easy to get the final touches on things. Um, it's like tricks and things. So yeah, I'm looking at this example. I'm seeing that if I look at the perspective of this pumpkin, it's kind of skewed on the side, right? It's like if I took a sphere or a cylinder and I did this, the top of it is very like like that, right? I'm noticing that here. Um, so I'm gonna
So,
do that.
to briefly summarize what you've been doing, you had a circle and you squished it, and then you cut it into 12 or 13 slices, and then you pulled out some parts, pushed in some parts, so you get kind of like the rivet thingy, and then you drew out the stem.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm doing extrusions. I'm
Mm.
doing you can do edit edge flows. So that's kind of like taking the shape. So now that I've done this, I'm like, I kind of like this shape, but this is a little bit drastic, so I can do that. I can edit the edge flow. It'll average. It'll follow. It'll take the positions of the vertices before and after it, and like try to find the middle ground of the curve. I'm going to do a slightly different operation here, where
So
like
in extrusion, guys, is let's say you drew like cut your surface up with a knife in a bunch of different little pieces. Extrusion is when you take a specific piece and then just pull it out, and then you can see like the stem part, it's sticking out, right? So you actually get like a part of the model and then you draw it out. It's a pretty
yeah,
cool technique.
yeah. So if I take this face and I extrude it, I'm like extending it kind of. It's cool. So like it's hard. That's not a great example. Let's do a different one where like let's say I had these faces. Okay.
Dom, what would you say is the feature that you use the most, or like the operations that you use the most?
Yeah. Extrude poly primitives are very like important. I'll even do boolean sometimes.
Mm.
But edit edge flow is a big one. I like to just pull things edit edge flow.
What is an
Um,
edge flow?
so you have in models something, it's called topology. It's more important for organic models, things that are going to be skinned to a joint. The topology of a model is the way these edges will flow. So the way the vertices connect into each other and
Mm.
how they kind of wrap around. And so that's called topology. It's very important on like a person's face and your hand. The way a model is basically going, the topology will affect how it kind of to a capacity. There's rigging to method like there's rigging things you do, but it also the topology is kind of a big part of like how well the mesh can deform and move.
Mm.
Um, and so edge
Oh.
flow is kind of like it takes that and like kind of considers where your edges are and their positions, and it'll
Mm.
like kind of like try to round it basically for you.
Oh,
So if
that's
you want
nice.
to, yeah. So I
So
do this. I'll just like, Yeah, but
In
I
real
know that's
life, guys, we have like an object and we know what it looks like, but we're basically having to teach the computer like how to make it in a 3D space in a program, right? That's actually kind of insane if you think about it, because they're all zeros and ones. So we are telling them like how to build a shape, but even if you have the same shape, you can make it with triangles or you can make it with squares, and depending on like how you tell them it's built. Let's say you guys know face mesh, like our 3D face mesh, but let's say this is not this is connected with this part in a different way, then even if you like open your mouth, your thing will be looking very unnatural because the connections are weird. That's why we have to use things like edge flow that Dom is describing to tell them, um, hey, this should be a triangle area. This is what a mouth should look like. So when you are moving or morphing or designing like this one, it looks natural and it's the most organic and optimized.
yeah, yeah. The edge flow and topology stuff, that is definitely something that it gets more complicated. Um, and it's definitely something that I think, when you're doing static models that don't need to necessarily, if you're going to animate a model and it's going to just move from one position to another, the topology, as long as it looks how you want it to look. And I think that's a great place to start. I think those technicalities you will learn as you need them, um, hopefully, and that's definitely something I would consider to be a little overwhelming if you are considering just to,
Yeah.
if you're just starting.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say don't worry about it, know about it, but don't stress about it. Come back to it when you have a firmer grasp on more things, more simple things like how to.
I heard that in animation studios, this is somebody's like full-time job. Like even after a 3D designer or like character designers come up with the idea and we have the 3D model, there's a full-time person whose job is to optimize and make sure that the topology or like how the triangles look are accurate and we get the best performance, and they spend all day doing that. So it is okay to be intimidated, and I feel like as a beginner, you don't have to worry about it too much. But it's definitely so interesting. And I heard that knowing how to do this like makes a world of a difference. So if you want to improve your steps, maybe you can look into this also.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's something always keep a learning mind of, because it's always changing too.
Yeah.
Um, but so here, all right, I'm gonna call it here so we can move on. Um, let's say this is the pumpkin I did. Um, I'm going to just show how I might like improve it, right? So when you hit smooth, you're this is changing the actual topology. This is adding polygons to the model, right? If I did a smooth operation. So like if I duplicate it, um, right, you can see my model has 672 faces. This one, when I hit three, it's showing me a preview so I can go back and forth. Um, it's now at like 10,000, right? Um, so like that's more. It's a lot more. It's probably fine. But what I want to explain is smoothing groups and stuff like that. Smoothing groups is, so when you have these vertices, it kind of calculates how much of it should be an edge, how much of it should be smoother. So I can grab this edge, for example, and I can soften it. And now you can see the edge is gone now. If I grab the whole mesh, I can do soften. It'll just do everything, right? You can see now it's like that. I can grab this, I can harden it. And so now I have like that there. So this is like a way of doing, keeping models like lower polygon. Not that we need to for this example, but I think it's something that it's going to come up when we export. Um, so like now I can do that, right? And so now my model looks a little that much better, right? It looks more like the pumpkin if I did
It looks
this.
so smooth. I love it.
Yeah, I was going to use these as the example, but I think hopefully I made that point. Hopefully that makes sense, right? And then I can pull this out and like do that, and then it looks smooth, and then my shape is better. But in this case, like let's just say that's where I ended the model at. We're going to continue using this example. But before we export, we need to consider something that is the UVs of a model. The UVs is how you are able to assign an image as a texture, right? Because when you assign a texture to an image to a model is 3D, a texture is 2D. How does that work? Um, UVs is where things get a little more complicated, but it's just think of it as skinning the model. I know it's not like the nicest way to think of it, but think of it as that. So you have this cube. If this is square, is my image. When you work in 3D, textures need to be a square resolution by 4. So it'd be a 256 pixel by 256 pixel, 1024 pixel by 1024 pixel. Does that make sense? It has to be by 4. It could be 5. It could be 512 by 256. It doesn't. If you import an image, it'll what it does in an engine, it will do it. It'll convert it for you. So you kind of want to just know what you're doing, have it set it to the dimensions that you need. Don't let the engine do it for you, even if it does, because you don't necessarily know what it's doing, right? It might do something you're expecting in a different way. So just have it be by 4. It also is like it's an older optimization thing. It takes time. It's not such a big deal anymore as far as that goes, but it also like takes up processing to do that, so it's less optimized. Um,
So what a UV is basically you're taking a wrapper and you want to color it, but we don't know how to tell the engine you should put this color over here. So imagine if you get a knife and totally like skin out the outside. That's kind of gross, but it's a pumpkin, it's fine. We've
yeah,
done it before. And then you'll basically have like a flat version of it. And then if we paint on the flat version and perfectly like put it back around again, then you can see exactly like where the color goes where. So this is what Dom is explaining to us and how we can color stuff.
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like to demonstrate that here, imagine this checkerboard with that says U1 is my image, right? Let's say that was my texture. It knows that like that's how it's going to map to the sphere. I can move this sphere around and it'll like always stay attached to that spot of the image of yeah, and it's based on like it's a UV because it's 2, but a vertex is 3, right? It's positioned in space, but so like if I now move this doesn't move. It's a little confusing because like you can move your UVs and it'll change on the model, right? But so that's kind of like yeah, and but yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Simple shapes I think are the most easy way to explain that. This face here maps here, so if I move it around, this part of the image now is being displayed on this face, right? It looks really stretched and it's kind of confusing because of that, but that's because the UVs themselves look this way. They're not evenly spread out, and so that's why the UVing process is a little bit of its own skill. When you create let's just say I didn't have any UVs. There's a couple ways to do it. Once you're familiar with UVs, I think you can very much just like planarly map it. And so planar map will just take a snapshot of it at that one plane. You can change it to be a different plane if you want. It's and then you can basically like create your cuts. Um, I would say like I want my cut to be here. And this is where topology is very useful, right? Because now I know like, oh, I have this edge loop. If I didn't and I had to do this, I'd have to grab it one by one. And because the model is a little bit messy, it's hard to see them all. So I have to like grab them one by one. And I can't, because I have this edge loop, I can just double click that. I can go here, I can cut it, and now they're unattached, right? I still can't unwrap it though. I still can't unwrap it, so I need to like give it another cut. I need to do that, and I need to do that. And if I do this, I know it will unwrap. All right, now I have it unwrapped there. And the reason I know I can do that is from experience, but I think the primitive shapes are really good examples of this, right? So if you ever get confused, maybe you can do your UVs early on in the modeling process. That'll help as well. It makes it a little easier before you have all these edges. Um, but you can always kind of reference simpler shapes. You can see how a cube, a cylinder is mapped, right? Always look at that, and that's kind of why I was explaining. Like, start simple, work your way up. You'll get there the more you do it.
I
Uh,
know Dom, as a professional designer, would absolutely hate what I'm about to say, but I think it's actually kind of funny if you unwrap the UV in a horrible, unorganized mess way, like just draw the lines everywhere, and then share it with my designer friends, and they're like, "Who wrapped the UV like this? I hate you."
hey, I've done things I'm not proud of. I think you sometimes, you got to get things done, and it just happens that way.
And
But there,
there's like some features in built into the engines usually that allows you to smart UV unwrap, which kind of does it for you. What do you think about those?
I'm not that familiar. I'll be honest. I
Mm,
think for me, once you get good at some of this stuff, like UVs are not really an issue for me anymore. I can just I don't know. It's a little maybe tedious to lay them out
yeah, yeah.
to be like make sure you're using the most space. That is something I maybe should mention. Like try to make sure you're using as much of your UV tile as possible. Don't get too lazy with it. Because the more you can fit into one tile, the less textures you need.
Hmm.
So that's maybe the most. That's still maybe something that's like a little bit time consuming for me, just to like try to be perfect with it. But no, I don't know. I've not used many of those auto features because I'm pretty. Once you get a good rhythm, you know when to do it and where to do it in a way where it's really not a hindrance to your workflow, as far as I think, as my opinion at least.
Dom is an
um,
excellent professional designer. I
no,
might
I
show
don't
you
mean
my
I
hacky
mean it
ways
like you'll
here.
get there. You'll get there. You just got to keep trying. But if you want to, that's what I was gonna say. Like maybe there's definitely tools that can help you along the way, and so if they're helpful for you, then do them. I think I was trying to do like a spherical, and so you could do that, right? So the um, spherical unwrap, it's like it's good for things that are like rounded, and so this looks like a mess. But if I unfold it, and like it's starting to kind of look like a pumpkin. It's starting to look good,
Mm,
and that's not bad. That's fine. I
yeah.
might just do some cuts here to like spread it out because so basically what it's doing is it has a hard time. It's getting really bunched up in this area because this is still connected,
Mm,
right? That's why it's doing this weird curve, which is also fine. Like it's really not that big a deal if you have that curve, but for me, I know that like I don't like that. So I will or it's not that I don't like that, but I know that like once you get into texture painting, you kind of get a style of painting, and like you have a workflow for that as well. And so the UVs kind of help enable you to do a certain type of workflow for your texturing. But now you can see that like this is much more evenly spaced out, right? And if I did the same thing here, I'll have um, I'll have a very like right? And so now like a good way to check your UVs is to open up this checker, right? And you can see where it starts to stretch and skew. And now they're like less stretched. Before you'd see the skewing here. I think it'll be most obvious on the bottom. Um, okay. Or I guess it still looks okay, but I don't know. It's a preference. At that point, it's a preference. This could work. This would be fine, and that's like one button, and that's totally okay. Um, Yeah, so I think that covers all the modeling stuff. Um, yeah, I'll just quickly talk about exporting. So we're gonna hide this. Oop, wrong button.
Oh, we've also gotten a lot of questions in previous office hours about exporting 3D animation. So maybe I'll ask a little question about that later.
For sure, for sure. So exporting is kind of straightforward. Um, let's just say. I do it here. Pumpkin
I
demo.
feel I love how you're so organized and everything is like in neat folders and you only have like 3 folders. For me, it's a nightmare. My download is like with like 1,000 individual files that aren't organized.
Well, there's definitely times where I am organized and times I'm not. But it helps to be organized with my projects. I like that.
Mm.
Because then when they get big, you don't know where your files are anymore. But not always, and I'm not always either. But yeah, so let's talk about the export settings real quick. So here are the smoothing groups that I mentioned, right? So if you did that softening and hardening of the edges and you wanted to preserve that, the smoothing groups, I always recommend having that on, and tangents and normals. Um, Triangulating, when you checking this on means that your mesh will become triangulated when you export. So what that means is this, it'll do that. It'll do that to your mesh. Um, you know, maybe you want that, maybe you don't. The engine reads it as triangles anyway, just so you know, under the hood. Um, it will, the polygons is kind of like, it's what we see in the tool, but what it's really doing to process and display it behind this like visual UI, it's as a triangle anyway. So checking this on, like you do this if you're never, if you don't want to change the model later, or if you want to like protect your assets, you triangulate the mesh. Sure, untriangulating a mesh is pretty difficult. It's tedious. Triangulating it means it's like no one's gonna. It's gonna be hard for someone to change it. Uh, Preserving instances. Some of these are like for FBXs and like I don't know. You know, you can. I usually don't use these. Selection sets, all that. That's like if I wanted to import it into another 3D package and it wanted, I had some kind of fanciness going on that I wanted to save. Like if I in 3ds Max, if I wanted to take this to that and then like work on it in Max or something, I don't do that. So I don't really do these. Smoothing mesh, I would avoid that as well. That's basically doing, that's taking it's taking your mesh and smoothing it. So, that's maybe fine. It's up to you. But I just do it, and then I do it in my scene if I want it. I have it. If I don't, then I don't need to do it on the export. You can turn all this off, and that's about it. You can export. So that's how you export. You finish it, hit export, it does it. Um, yeah.
We
Then
have a
you
question
for sure. What's
about
up?
UVs. Haley Capaz is asking any tips for unwrapping if none of the unwraps really work well for the UVs. Some of my old models have such horrible topology that it is difficult even to add the inseams for UV unwrapping.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sometimes you just have to kind of find the place that is going to be less visible. Like on this pumpkin model, if you really look at it, the seam is it's in the back of the mesh, and like if you look at it, it is visible to that from an angle, the way it was textured. So it's sometimes not the best, and sometimes it's painful. Use it as a learning experience. But I think without context into specifically what kind of model it is and like looking at it, it'd be hard for me to give any like advice. But it might be a little bit manual labor of just going in and kind of like what I mentioned earlier. Like if I didn't have that edge loop here and going in one by one and selecting them, I've done that. I've definitely done that. And sometimes you have to do that. And then you remember that you did that the next time you make a model and you avoid it by adding an edge.
This is how we learn through
uh,
painstaking clicking, and we're like, why didn't
yeah,
I do this?
yeah. But it's part of the learning journey. So
Mhm.
don't get upset. Enjoy it.
Haley, personally, I think it is amazing that you're even creating your own assets. So applaud to you. Let's work on. I'll have Dom again, and he can teach us beginners 101.
Yeah, I'm
And
happy to come on more often. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, that's fantastic.
Because there's
Dom, people
yeah.
on the TikTok live side is saying your voice is super effective and soothing. I agree. I feel like he should do a ASMR because I feel like he could put me to sleep. So amazing.
Well, thank you, thank you. Thanks. uh, Yeah. Well, all right. Let's maybe is there any other questions? Should I get into the text? I feel like maybe we're falling behind on time a little bit.
Saint
Uh,
Circle is saying I can always listen to him. I think he should do some audiobooks.
Audiobooks. I'll have to keep that in mind.
Maybe Saint Circle, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll launch an ebook and then we'll have Dom narrate it so we can be an audiobook.
Awesome. Love it.
Sounds good.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Here, let me get into this real quick, just because I know sometimes people open up. So I use Substance Painter texture, right? You don't have to. You can do it whichever way you want. I think Substance Painter is pretty useful. Um, so you have this is probably a confusing part for people. There's a lot of options, right? All of these are like this is an effort to make things fit into multiple workflows. If you don't have a specific one, like we don't have a one here, but like if you were going to export for Blender, maybe you do that. This is basically just saying the material, because it has to export the textures to suit a type of material and their workflow. We use PBR, so we will be using that. I recommend Alpha Blend, but Alpha Blend, maybe you don't need alphas. Alpha is like a transparency. Like if you don't need parts of the model to be not shown, you can just do regular. Alpha blend is where you can have like a gradient. Alpha test is like hard, hard 0 and 1 showing of hiding pixels. So we'll just do blend. I always do blend if I need it. That way I have it available. You can always add it too. So don't get hung up here. You can always change it. Um, yeah. The only thing you should know is you turn on OpenGL if you're working out of Maya, and then you select the model. I'm gonna do the pumpkin model that we already had. That was the one that I showed to export. And I leave all this, but if you wanted to unwrap auto, you could try this here. I've never messed with this though. Um, but yeah, you open it up, it will start, and then here we go. We have our pumpkin, and it shows you your UVs here, which is
This looks
handy.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Even
a
though
great
it's
pump.
my color, like I already love it. It actually
Yeah,
looks like one of those like white pumpkins that they sell at Target. I would buy this.
yeah, yeah. And this is kind of where I like to. Yeah, this is where things start to look good. Um, the only thing you need to do for Substance Painter is you do need to have these three at least. I do these four. If I have a sculpt that I'm projecting onto a lower poly model, I'll do the normals as well. But I always do these, and you do need them. It'll look even better once you do, because it needs these maps to do part some of the way it creates like it needs them for some of the texturing stuff it does. Um, so we'll just do real quick. Um, yeah, basically what I did was I turned up the quality of it. Turning up the secondary rays just means it'll be a higher quality. You can mess with this here. Oh, I'll do a 1024 texture. I'll do that again. And the anti-aliasing, you can mess with this. It will make this take a lot longer depending on, I think it'll still be quick for this example, but turning up anti-aliasing, especially to 60, even 64 is a lot. I didn't know they did 64. But I used to do two, I think, just to have a little bit of blurring so the pixels aren't super rough. Um, but let's see. You see it's already taking a bit longer than it did. Here, I'm just gonna turn that off so we don't spend time because it's not gonna make a difference. But maybe you want to mess around with some of that if you feel like the textures it generates are gonna be a little bit pixely, then you would turn that on. Um, but for this, it's fine. Da-da. Cool. It also is taking longer because I changed it to a 1024 pixel resolution, which is much bigger. You don't realize sometimes how much bigger these textures are. It's just a number that goes up, and then when you wait for it to to do that, you're like, oh, That's how much bigger that takes
I
to read.
actually relate to this because I think one time I was trying to make like a semi big file in Photoshop, and I was like, oh, 2000 pixels by 3000 pixels, it's not that big. But then I later found out that I put it in inches instead, or like meters, and
Oh,
it was
geez.
just like a humongous file, and my computer crashed and burned. And then I was like, what's wrong? So it's just like a little number, it's so easy to miss. You don't know how big it is actually.
Yeah, yeah. 2000 pixels is a pretty big, it's like a pretty good amount. It's like poster size, I think. Uh, 2000, I think, I forget off the top of my head. But anyway, yeah, either way. But yes, yes, they get huge. Um, but yeah, so let's explain the PBR workflow. So PBR means physically based rendering. What that means is you have a metallic texture map, right? So you decide it's basically about everything is a texture. So it's a even if it's just one black and white, it takes a texture and it'll say basically like, is it metallic or is it not? If it's metallic, it has like the secondary
That's the
reflection.
Renaissance pumpkin baby.
Yeah, yeah. And then so you have the metallic map, you have the roughness map. The roughness is like how shiny it is. If it's not metallic, you still have a specular map, right? But it looks different. Super specular still means it has, at zero, it'll still reflect the environment, but metallic affects the kind of the way the color is read as well. Um, and then you have an ambient occlusion, which is baked in. MREL. Yeah, I think that's generally the textures. Metallic roughness, ambient occlusion. That's a PBR workflow. It, you know, and that's a pretty common thing in real time now. Um, and so I will explain. So basically, yeah, you choose a hue, you choose how saturated it is, and then you choose a value. And a rule of thumb to follow when you're doing PBR is you shouldn't really go to one. You see how bright it's getting? It's getting really overly exposed. And that's because it's trying to follow
Alien.
a, that's because it's trying to follow a physically based um, rendering. It's based off of reality, and a common thing I think is not always understood is the color white is actually very gray. It looks whiter than it is because of the value of things around it. And so this is where like color theory and things start to happen. Um, so like this is white, and then Substance Painter actually does this by default. Like if I create they give you a gray color, but that's what white is. If you start going crazy white, then it starts. You see how hot it starts to get. So that's I think something you should be aware of when you do physically based rendering workflows. When you start texturing with it, if you're doing snow, you might go up to like zero point 0.8. Right? That's something you should know about. If you're going up to snow, because snow sometimes gets like really fresh snow, it reflects so much light, it gets really, really white. But generally, a white color, like if I'm doing eyes, I kind of go, if I'm going into doing someone's eye, that's probably as bright. Like I probably will stick to zero point 0.7, somewhere there. And so, yeah, that's basically how you do it. I'll do a quick mock of like how I like to texture. I'll start with like a big base. I'll set my color to like purple. So, or not purple, orange. I'm sorry, not purple. Um, I'll do
I
that,
would
and then
love a
I'll be like,
purple pumpkin though.
yeah, I'm gonna say like, oh, this I want to be like the base of the pumpkin. I'm not thinking about the stem yet. And I want that there. I'm like, oh, you know what? It should be a little rougher. It shouldn't be super shiny. It should be there. And okay, fine, that's good. I will now do the stem. So now for the stem, I will do like the brown. I'm like, that's a good brown. And I'm definitely gonna, I also like to reference how much I used on this one. So I was like, okay, the stem should probably be more rough. So I'll go like even to zero point 0.6. Then I make a mask. I'll do a paint. So now it's hidden because I've put it behind a black mask because I only want the stem part, right? So now I can do that. And so now, that's like there. you know, boom, it's starting to look a little bit like a pumpkin. Uh, a lot of things, if you want to make something look realistic, it's a lot of layering of noise. So it's something to keep in mind. A lot of noise. So I might duplicate this. Um, I will adjust it. I will add another mask. I'll add. So now I'm hiding it. I will add fill, but I'll put like, let's just use any noise for now. Because honestly, you can do a lot with like simple noise. It's a very, I definitely underrated it when I was working, originally when I was learning texturing, this and stuff like that. And maybe I want the noise to show like a darker pumpkin. Actually, I should have brought this down. 2.7. And then this will be like the spots of the pumpkin that are maybe like a little yellowy. Sure. And then like much darker, right? It's like dirt on the pumpkin, right? And then it'll also be more rough. If it's dirt, it should be more rough. So like that's how that looks. And then you start building it up. You do that. You you might want to. You can look at your maps separately, so you can see like, okay, what does my color map look like? What is my roughness map looking like? You can kind of like use that to isolate your views. And so like I like to I check my base color a lot, and I'll be like, I don't like how this isn't being shown in the base, so I'll add that. Um, so I will do a really dark color. I'll add mask, and then so those textures that we baked earlier, we can add them in. So I can add the curvature, right? And I can do the cavities of it, right? So I can see now that it's showing it to me. I can adjust it. Another way I like to, I just invert it. Um, and so like obviously that's extreme. I can blur it, um, right? So things are starting to happen. I can like adjust. So before you blur it, I would usually blur things last just so it's really clear like what changes I'm making. If you're making a change, um, you know, you should you should be aware of like how the changes. I might even look at the mask. If the colors are really subtle, you can't tell just by looking at the color map. So I might look at the mask, and then I'll do that. Maybe I want the contrast. So I really just want those crevices. And then like, you build it up. You start building it up. Maybe the crevices, I don't like how it's catching light, so maybe I'll change that too. So now I'll add a roughness to it. I'll just like crank it all the way down, right? So not only the curvy parts are getting, highlights. And so that's how you build up your textures. It's really about knowing how to build it up and knowing what you want to achieve. Like I'll show you what we ended up with for the pumpkin. It's very like it's only a couple layers. Um, right? So this is
I have a question. When you guys are deciding what color to choose the pumpkin, I mean, there's so many options to choose from. You can have like really bright orange, or you can have like a yellowish orange, or like an unmatured green one, or a white one, or a black one for Halloween. How did you guys decide on that iconic color? And whether there was disputes around team members around what color the pumpkin should be?
yeah, yeah. I think I don't know about this one specifically, but I do think that's where you look at your references. Gathering references at the beginning is important, not so you know what to do, but also to decide like, on a direction. Some of the references you might gather would be for like your style guide, your story, things like that. Because you can do them in many different ways, and depending on what you set out to achieve, success looks very different. So, you know, if I decided if the pumpkin was meant to look like older, it would be like a not as vibrant of a color, right? I think for me, it seems like we wanted it to like pop a lot. We wanted it to look bright and vibrant and like, look like something you'd want to put on your face or something. If the colors don't look like very warm and bright, then it looks very dead. And so like if that's what you want to achieve, though, that's exactly
Zombie
that's what you
pumpkin.
do.
I don't know.
Yeah. And but I do think like it's always nice to do this workflow because you can always decide, maybe this color is too bright. Maybe I'll desaturate the pumpkin, or maybe I'll bring it down, right? Maybe I want it to be like really orange instead. Um, oh, that's the wrong layer. Like the base, right? So maybe I bring it down, right? Maybe we decide, oh, let's change the pumpkin. Let's make it look really like sick, and then you just bring the value down, bring the saturation. Now it's like rotting, and I can do that by just going into the color and changing it here, um, right? So yeah, very once you have this that's part of the reason I really enjoy using Substance Painter. I think for me it's like very very easy to make changes if you want to. It's easy to explore some of it. um, but yeah, this was what we ended up with. You have your base with the color roughness. There's a little bit of variation going on here with the colors. So this color is being, that's giving that effect, and this one's giving the brightness effect. And then the stem is just same idea. You, we had the moss here, like the little, I guess that's moss, right? You get
Wow.
those, and then the base above that, and there's the dirt, lots of layers of, it's never just a flat color. I think that's something to always like look at if you're getting it started with texturing. Maybe just sample a bunch of texture stock images and just use those, because then I think you will start to see like how much is in it and what makes how much is noise and how much noise looks at a distance, how much, what it looks like up close. You kind of start to understand like it's like an optical illusion to some extent. um, and yeah, so that's pretty straightforward, you know setup, I would say, for this texturing. um, then you export the textures. I mentioned earlier physically based rendering. um, yeah, albedo is the base. Albedo is the base. Normal. We have our own. Do I have it here? Yeah. Um, there we go. Yeah, base color normal. Metallic. It's one texture. The red map is metallic. The green, the red channel. The green channel is the roughness, and the blue channel is the AL. And that's how that texture. So then when you put it into the engine says, let's look at this texture's red channel, and it gets the metallic information. Let's look at its green channel, and let's get the roughness information. So basically, you're consolidating three textures into one image. Is basically what that does. If that makes sense. So the engine will say, this is the blue channel, this is the red channel, and then I don't think you can see the AL, but the AL map is exported, and it's the green channel of one image, and that's what the export looks like. Um, that is why I will pull up the texture. That is why this texture looks the way it does. Um, it looks a lot like what you would expect, but that's because those colors, those black and white values into those channels will create these colors. That's why these textures look the way they do. But it's the combination of the red, green, and blue channels and their values. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. It is a little complicated, um, but yeah. When we're ready, we could import it. Or sorry, if there are any questions, but I think I do want to wrap it up by bringing it into Effect House.
Hmm.
Um, and at that point, you've got your model, you've got your textures. Um, I just wanted to quickly go over like the materials. There's so many, right? An unlit material, it's just the color, right? It's just the color. There's no lighting information there. You see how like there's lights in the scene, and it's not affected by any of them, right? And so that's useful. That's useful for things that, if you want it to look exactly like your color map, you can still use that. If you want like a really stylized thing, you can do that. Um, Then there is simple lighting. Simple lighting is just it's not a PBR workflow. It's a material that just it's like it's just simple. It's more optimized. It's less heavy on the computation of things, and that requires its own textures. But yeah, that's what that will look like. So for general purposes, PBR is the one where the metallic roughness ambient occlusion things go into, right? And that's what this will look like. Um, you know, the example I was giving earlier where white is really hot, kind of maybe bring it down to gray. Um, yeah. So the pumpkin material, and this is on the template. So, you know, you import, if I was to do this, I would import from my computer. I would go to the desktop. Yeah, I would just import them as usual. A quick thing I think maybe that I learned about that changed things a lot for me. If I have like fine details in the texture, um, so Effect House will automatically compress things. Sometimes maybe you can change it to none, and it'll just give you more details, right? You can see the size of the actual texture changes, right? Um, or does it? Sometimes it'll adjust here, but maybe not. Um, but yeah, so sometimes maybe change it to none if you feel like your textures are not looking how you expect them to. Um, yeah, but so the material, you plug in the albedo there into this. You can change, or I'll show the pumpkin as well, so you can see the changes of it. So we've got the pumpkin here. This is what that looks like with the material assigned. Um, I'll take off the rim lighting because the rim lighting is also helping it like pop a lot. Um, and I'll take off the normal, and I'll take off the right. So yeah, you assign the color, and that's what it looks like with just the color assigned. You can, if you decide you want to change it, you can always do it. You want it darker. You want it, this is where I would do white because what you're saying is you're multiplying every pixel by this value, which is one. So you want it at white, it reads exactly how your texture looks. If you do a gray, you're multiplying every pixel by like this 0.5, like by this value. And so like that's kind of how I think you're multiplying. I don't know exactly if that's true, but kind of gives this effect of like, yeah. But so this is where what I said earlier isn't consistent. You want it white. You want it white here because you're using the texture, and the texture isn't white. If that makes sense, you have a layer of separation from that. Um, yeah, you plug in your normal, you plug in your MRAO, and you crank it to one because we want it to be the values that we textured it at. And then the last little touch here is the rim light. The rim light really helps like bring it up pop. Um, and yeah, that I think covers everything. Sorry, I rushed the last part of it. But yeah, if there's more questions, happy to elaborate on anything.
I know today we covered on a lot of topics from sculpting to substance painting and then importing into Effect House and adjusting the settings so it looks perfect and as from Blender. But in the later episodes, if you guys are more interested in these topics, we can bring back Dom and then we'll make him talk about one specific part and we'll go really slow and have a detailed tutorial. So if you guys want that, be sure to mention it in the live channel so I know how many people want it. But I think this was an amazing tutorial. Thank you so much, Dom.
Yeah, yeah. Happy. Hope it helps. Happy to hop on.
Brett,
Uh,
you jokester. Brett is saying, I came late. Can you start over?
yeah, sure, sure. It's recorded, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. But yeah, no, happy to hop back on. If there is more interest in this, yeah, I think because this is definitely like I tried simplifying it as much as I could, um, but it's some of the it's just a lot. There's a lot to learn in certain areas. So if there's questions that make sense, don't feel like there's never a bad question to have. Yeah.
Before we go, we reached 50 viewers on TikTok Live earlier. So, you know what that means? We're going to see a video of Tom breakdancing. Woohoo!
All
Carol,
right.
you want to shoot the video? Let's go. Oh my gosh, I'm shredding. Look at that swing. That is incredible. Oh my god.
It looks good.
Wow. That's insane. How did you get into breakdancing? Acapella?
It was I've always interested. The way I was able to get into it, there was a part in school where I started it to learn a few moves, and I found it relatively easy at first, and then just kept going.
Wow, I am so impressed. I asked Dom, like, hey Dom, does it work? And he's like, I saw one guy breakdancing. I was like,
That's a good thing. He was kind of quite chill. But since I knew him, I was just like, "Let's go."
smart. Okay, guys, this pumpkin theme that we went over today, you can use it right now on your canvas. There is a template we published multiple templates for Halloween, and one of them is this pumpkin head with the face inset option. So go try it out. It's called 3D pumpkin face, and it should be the first one in the recommended template. So go live out your spooky pumpkin lives. But now that Dom has taught us so much about like texturing, you can use the same model but change the colors or add different parts of it. So instead of it having like a really vibrant pumpkin, you can make a Walking Dead pumpkin, or you can make a vampire pumpkin, or you can do a Renaissance fiance pumpkin. So use it, change it, explore. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. I love that.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay. I personally really want to see a video of you guys using the 3D pumpkin face. So if you make an effect with it, or if you use the template and shoot a video with it, put it in the live channel, and we'll watch it together. Okay. Any final departing words, Dom?
um, Happy Halloween.
Happy
I think.
Halloween.
No, I hope it helps. I hope it's helpful. But yeah, if there's more demand for this, happy to elaborate and explain more for sure.
That's
Because I
fantastic.
know, don't be overwhelmed though. It's definitely a lot to learn and take it step by step.
Haley Cat Paws said, I would definitely love to see Dom again. So I think we need you back here.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. Bye, guys. This is the end of the stream. Thank you for admiring my cardigan. I saw someone commented on it earlier. I am very proud. I thrifted it and I feel like it's perfect for the spooky season. Um, Next on the list, next Tuesday, which is August's office hours, happens to be exactly on Halloween. So I don't know. Maybe you might see us in some fun outfits. But keep coming back, send those videos. I want to see you as a pumpkin. So bye, guys. You can't see, but Dom is also
Yeah,
shaking
yes, I'm
and
waving.
waving his
I
hand.
promise.
Bye.